In this tutorial I'm going to show you how to crochet the waistcoat stitch, also known as the knit stitch, because your final fabric gives the appearance of it being knit together with these V's rather than looking like a crocheted piece. It's quite a solid stitch, so there's very little gaps in between, and it looks the same on both sides because it is a repeated pattern once you get past the first row. You get quite a nice thick fabric from it, and it's very sturdy. So let's have a look at the tutorial. So for this tutorial I'm going to be using a chunky yarn, just because it makes it easier for you to see where I'm placing the stitches, as this one's a little bit trickier than most stitches. I'm also going to be using quite a large crochet hook, one because I'm using a chunky yarn, but to try to go up maybe 1 or 2 hook sizes from the recommended hook size on your label. You can make this with any yarn, so for example if you were using a double knit yarn and the recommended size would be a 4mm hook, you might want to go up to a 5 to a 6. So just because it's quite a tight stitch, and you want to be able to actually get your hook in between your stitches, as you'll see in a moment. So we're going to start off with a slip knot. You can do this in whichever way you prefer. I'm going to make a foundation chain. You do not need to make this in multiples of any particular number, so you can make this as long or as short as you want. So I'm going to make my foundation chain 10 long. Now try not to do it too tightly, especially if you're using a chunkier yarn. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and I'm going to do one more for turning. So we're going to work double crochets. That's UK terminology. In US terminology we're going to do single crochets. From the second chain from the hooks, we don't count the one on the hook, so that's 1, 2, and we're going to work back down our row with our double or our single crochets. Again, try not to make these too tight, as it will make the next row pretty tricky. So work down your row and I will see you at the end of your row. So I've come to the end of my row. That's exactly the same as I would do any row of double crochets. So I've chained and I've worked my way back down. So I'm going to chain 1 and turn my work. So I've chained 1 and turned, and I have the V at the top of all my stitches, and that's ordinarily where we'd go. So we would go in here, yarn over, pull through, and we would complete our stitch. For the waistcoat stitch, we don't go through the top here, we go through the V's. So if you can look at your stitch here, and just take my hook out. So you have your top of your stitch there, then you have a little bumpy bit here, and just underneath you have what look like upside down V's or capital A's, and if you just pull those stitches apart slightly, there is a gap in there, and it's into this gap that we're going to crochet. So just underneath the bump here and into the gap. So you ignore this first part here with the chains. Now this row can be quite tight, so be very relaxed if you can. Relax your shoulders whilst you're doing this. So insert just underneath that bump between these two verticals, push it through. You might have to wiggle it around a bit, yarn over, pull through. So subsequent rows will be easier. This first one is particularly tight, and then complete your crochet stitch. So you miss out this gap where you'd ordinarily go in, move over to the next stitch, find that V or upside down V, and go between those two stitches there, or two parts of the stitch there. So you have to wiggle your hook in, even trickier when you're using chunky yarn. And push it through to the other side. Yarn over and pull through. Again, find that upside down V. You can pull it apart to help you find it. Insert your hook, wiggle it through, yarn over, pull back through, and complete your stitch. So again, find that V, pull them apart, insert your hook, give it a wiggle, and a little shove with this one, and pull through. So we're going to do that all the way down to the end of this row. So pause the video now if you want to work slowly down your row, making sure you go through all the V's, and when you get to this last V, play the video again and I'll show you what we need to do next. So I've worked my way down the line, going in between the V's of the previous row, and if you flip it over you'll see you're creating V's on the other side. So when you get to your last stitch, we're going to work a normal double crochet or single crochet in US terminology into that last stitch, just to keep the edge of the row nice and tidy. Okay, so now that row is the repeated pattern row. So you're going to chain one, turn your work, and then you're going to find your V's to work into for the next row. Now this row will be so much easier because you're going into V's of waistcoat stitch rather than the V's of a double crochet, which would be a little bit tighter. Still might need to wiggle, but that's okay. We all need to have a good wiggle every now and then. So I'm just going to work up a few more rows to show you what it looks like when it's completed, and I will join you in a moment. So I've just worked up a few more rows for you to see how it looks. So it's the same on both sides because obviously it's a repeated one row pattern. You get a really lovely texture from the stitch, and you get that knit look appearance from those V's, which you won't get with any other crochet stitch. You only get that with knitting. So really sturdy fabric that you get when you've finished, and you can make baskets with this if you want to do it in the round. You can make a nice chunky hat, you can make a lovely blanket with it. So a really great stitch to use. So if you've enjoyed this tutorial and you'd like to see more of my videos, please don't forget to subscribe, it's free to do so. I'll pop 2 more videos on screen to help you on your crochet journey, and I will see you over there. Thank you so much for joining me, and happy hooking!